All right.
Awesome. Oh, also, I forgot to tell you, these are gonna be, these are gonna be like recorded. Like, I'm gonna post them, yeah, like all of the lives I've done so far are gonna be like recorded and stuff. And I'll also post like some clips on my Substack as well from our conversation too. So, if people are interested, they can always, watch, the live recording back. So,
Cool. I am super glad that I moisturized today and put on a makeup because if I'm going to live on the internet forever, want to look good.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, for me personally, like I haven't. Well, since I've been doing these, every day since December 1st, it's kind of, got to, where I'm just like, oh, I hope they don't catch me, lacking, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say like I've kind of been following along a little bit and I caught the recaps of some of the folks that you talked to, and you're about 75% of the way through, three quarters through now. You're still in
Yeah.
it, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's December 9th. Should be over after the 12th. So, and after that, I'm probably going to do like a little recap of, everything, what I've learned. And also, just thanking all of the people that, came on and agreed to do this because it was definitely a lot, something I'm not used to doing. I'm definitely not used to going live this much, especially in a month. I would never imagine going live 12 times. I've probably gone live like 3, 4 times, like in a year of like being on Substack. So let alone going live 12 times in 1 month is kind of uncharted territory for me. So
Good for you. Good for you. I was gonna say it's obviously it takes a heck of a lot of discipline to go live day after day after day for 12 days in a row. Like that's a lot because when you're hosting something like this, you need to obviously you're always gonna feel that need, that urge to be on and be
Mhm.
present. And it takes so much energy. It takes so much emotional and cognitive energy to do that. So like good for you. It's great.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, because yeah, like there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of lessons I've been learning too. I mean, it's been nice. The conversations have been nice, but I've always felt like I gotta be on, especially, when you have guests on, like you don't want to, you always want to make sure you're, on your best, and, really attentive and like that. So, and sometimes that part can be exhausting where it's just like, ugh, gotta be on all the time to make sure everyone, just to make sure everyone, everyone's story is, shared in, a great way and stuff like that. And everyone gets like a good
Yeah,
experience coming on here. So,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
but yeah, this was definitely an awesome experience. I'm definitely gonna probably do another live, at the end, about like my experience, with this and things that I've
Oh,
learned.
what was it
But
like?
yeah, yeah, because it's definitely been, a journey, but a good one because I wanted to push myself. I think, I've been inspired just because of all the live streams I've been doing. I was actually inspired by a friend of mine who came on here. Her name's Margaret. She did like the second day, I think, and I was actually inspired by her because she goes live like on Substack a lot. So I was just like, dang, like maybe I should go. I'm primarily like a writer, so I was always like, maybe I should like go on live more. Try and get like the live experience. Maybe people resonate with video more. So you
Yeah,
know,
and push yourself too. It's really good to push yourself when you're
yeah,
trying, you're building stuff like this. Yeah.
yeah, I push myself content wise. And now now because of this, I've gotten people that I've asked that like couldn't unfortunately do like the story miss stuff because all the spots were filled. So like some of them, I've already got like a few people doing, live streams with them in January already. So,
That's great. And hi to all the folks who are trickling in. Me and
yeah.
Deja are just chat. We're just kind of bantering. We're chilling out. I'm glad that you could join us. We'll get chatting in a few minutes.
Awesome. Hey guys, thanks so much for, showing up. And again, if you've been to more than one live stream. Thank you so much. Again, me and the guests work really hard to, put these together and hopefully, you've enjoyed, the live stream so far if you've been to more than one. If you haven't, you can always go back and watch those recordings. And if you're here for this one, thanks so much. And, I hope you enjoy the conversation. So,
Yeah, and for the folks who are just kind of getting here, if you haven't been following along, I caught a part of Margaret's this afternoon, Margaret Williams, and it was awesome. Like, go watch it. I watched a little bit of DJ's session. That was super, super fascinating. It was really, really interesting. I caught some of Will's session as well. Listened to what he had to say. Like, guys, it's just really, really great conversations. Like, you will learn something. You will like expand your horizons. So go back and watch some of these sessions that are pre-recorded that Khadijah's got the links for.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paul, for saying that. I'm so glad, like you've been following along and things like that. So with that being said, again, some people like come in late and stuff and trickle in late. So, I've had these live streams like start at like 5 people and then get to like 30, by the end of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
so, with that being said, guys, for the sake of time and to make sure, we get Paul in here, we're gonna get started. Again, thank you all so much for coming to this live stream, and thank you so much, Paul, for agreeing to come on here and, share your story with us. So I try to get like a diverse, like array of like experiences and people from, different walks of life and, things like that. And I think what you have to share is very interesting, and I think you're very knowledgeable in what you do. And so, thanks so much. And without further ado, please take it away. Tell us your story, your experience, and your expertise in what you do.
Yeah. I mean, thanks for having me. I really appreciate you inviting me to join. And for the folks who have come at the very, very start, I'm going to treat you to something. I would like to introduce you to my work slippers.
Flamingos. That's one of my favorite animals. So,
One of the great things about working for yourself, and I work for myself. I work from wherever there's an internet connection and a seat for me to sit in and something warm to sip on. You can wear your slippers. Like I'm in my living room working, and the lobby of my building working, and I wear those slippers around. At this point, they're my good luck slippers, and those slippers that are just they're silly. I'm a big guy. I walk around and I'm just physically big, like I'm about 6 feet tall, and wide. And people find that a little bit intimidating sometimes. So about 12 years ago, I was working with a consumer electronics company here in Canada, based in Toronto, and I was this person who joined this company, and everybody was younger than me. A lot of the folks who I was working with, they were just out of school, just out of college, just out of university, and they all knew each other really well. It was a tight knit group, and I was this random person who was older than them and big, physically imposing, and I made some people nervous just kind of by being who I am, the nature of that. So around Christmas time one year, I said to folks like, "Hey, there's mush and slush and crap outside, and we're kind of tracking it through the office. Why don't we just start wearing slippers or whatever? Like, bring in your cozies, your slippers, like change your shoes at the door. Like, it's all good. Be comfortable." And I kind of took it as an opportunity to maybe like break the ice a little bit with people and make them more comfortable. And I bought those friggin' slippers that are ridiculous. But seeing me, 6 feet tall, walk into a room wearing pink flamingo slippers, it makes you smile. It makes people laugh, and people just kind of relaxed a little bit around me after that, and they just kind of chilled out, and they realized that I'm goofy just like them. So I'm not scary or anything. It was something that was really kind of helpful in making people feel at ease, and they've stuck with me ever since. I kind of still wear them around, and it's just become a bit of a thing. So, who am I? I'm Paul. I have had an interesting path. There's that saying that is kind of popular, like man smiles and God makes, or man makes plans and God laughs in his face, or something like that. That's a little bit my story. I graduated university in 2007, 2008, around there. For folks who kind of remember the housing crisis and all of that, I was coming out of university around there, and it was not a great time to start a career. And I figured at the time that I would go and work for the government here in Canada. I actually studied history. I got a liberal arts degree, and I was recruiting to, at one point, be a part of this country's intelligence service. So I spent 12, 13 months in that process, and it just did not work out for me. So I went back to school and I studied business administration and communications. After that, I had kind of gotten myself a little bit of the startup and entrepreneurs bug. So I started a little company with some friends, and it did okay. We sold it. Then I went back to school, started another company. Did not go okay. It completely fell apart, and that was a bit of a journey. We learned a lot there. And after that kind of second experience and coming into failure, I thought to myself, geez, well, I should go and get a grown-up job. I should go and work for a company and see what that's like. So I did. I went and worked for ad agencies in Ottawa, our nation's capital, and did that for 5 or 6 years before really realizing that it wasn't for me. So from there, I moved to Toronto, biggest city in the country, and joined this consumer electronics company that at the time was very, very small. They were selling products in 2 or 3 countries, maybe. And by the time I left 10 years later, we'd grown to selling in maybe 120 countries, pretty much everywhere that you could sell stuff. We were selling stuff. And the team that I kind of built over that 10 years that I was there, that's what they did. And we didn't really have anybody to talk to and to learn from. We had to figure stuff out on our own, which was pretty valuable unto itself. You learn a lot when you're forced to figure something out and you can't really like go to somebody else and say, what do I do? It's a character building exercise.
Wow. Wow. Well, wow, that's definitely sounds like a whirlwind, being pulled in, different directions. Well, why did the company that you started with, the first one that you started with your friends, why did that go awry?
It's so the company that I started with my friends, the one that didn't go so well, it didn't work out because we were too early. So we were building a product that used QR codes to conduct market research in retail environment. So you would walk into a store, you would scan a QR code, and you would fill out a survey about what you saw, whether it was a product or whether it was something else. You think about today, 2025, super common. You see those all over the place, right? Like they're ubiquitous. But this was in 2011. This was before the technology was really ubiquitous. Like for you to be able to scan a QR code on your smartphone, like you think about the iPhone or whatever, back in 2011, it was only 4 years old. But to be able to scan a QR code, you had to download a special app and you had to install it. You had to figure out how to use it. And think about like when you go to the grocery store. If you go to the grocery store and you see a QR code, but you can't do anything with it, are you going to stop in the grocery store to figure out how to use it, or are you going to carry on with your shopping? You're going to carry on with your shopping. You probably got kids that you got to take to soccer, you got to get dinner on, you're in a hurry. Like you just don't have a lot of attention and kind of mental time for figuring that stuff out. So because of that dynamic, that startup it failed. Nobody adopted the technology. I have a patent with my name on it that here in Canada that is a process patent for doing that using QR codes for consumer research. But we abandoned that because there was really no point in paying the fees to keep that patent going. So we just let it go. But I still find it kind of fun to say to people at cocktail parties or dinner parties or whatever, like, have you ever written a patent? And they say, well, no, why would I write a patent? I said, oh, yeah, no, it's a very good point. Why would you write a patent? Funny story, my
Wow. It's awesome, like, how it's like to think that it kind of failed just because you guys were, like, so far sort of, like, ahead of, like, the curve when it came to, technology and when, those things would happen. So,
And
how
hindsight's
much of
2020. Hindsight's
yeah.
2020. Like at the time, we couldn't have known that, right? Like we just had this idea and we were going for it. But looking back on it now, like failed because we were too early. The fundamental underlying pieces didn't exist for that to be successful. They exist now, and there are companies doing what we were doing that 15 years ago that exist now and are very successful and good for them. Like it's great. Sometimes your idea is just a little bit too early or the conditions don't exist for it to flourish. Sometimes you can fail without really it being your fault.
Wow, and that's an amazing point that I kind of want to go a little deeper on because I've always had this conception that, like as a business, like especially like as a startup, like you just want to be like super early, with your idea and then just, remain consistent and like eventually, like people will start catching up and like always about like getting a piece of the pie or being early to the party before everyone else tries to join in. I've always thought like especially in the social media age where things move so quickly and where with the internet when things are evolving, I've always thought that being early is like a benefit to like a
Yeah.
business, but in your case it seems it's really interesting that it seems like it wasn't. So
Yeah. First mover advantage can be a huge benefit. Like, don't get me wrong. There are businesses where, you go in, you've got what you're going to do all figured out. You start your business and you're there first, and that conveys you an enormous advantage over the people that follow you. But the conditions for success and growth, they have to be there. So in the case where, that doesn't happen, second mover advantage is actually more important. And when we talk about second mover advantage, what we're really talking about is someone else was first. You watch them very, very closely. You see what's going on with the market, what's going on with their business, what's going on with their customer base, and you plan a little bit more strategically and you think through what you're doing so that you can enter the market, compete with the first mover in a way that is advantageous to you. And second mover advantage, we don't really talk about a lot, but it can be very, very powerful. And for the folks at home, I don't think I actually explained what I do now. So
yeah, yeah, go into that for us.
yeah, I left the consumer electronics company that I was working with for a decade, well, maybe 13, 14 months ago, and struck out on my own as a consultant. And I'm a generalist consultant. So what I do is I help businesses who are trying to figure out how to scale, how to grow, do so a little bit less painfully, and figure out how to navigate kind of the bumpy waters of expanding your business with less pain. And I also work with people who want to start businesses who say, I've always wanted to start a business. I've always wanted to kind of work for myself, but I don't know anything about that. Or I need to level up. I need some experience. I need some skills, or maybe I need some confidence. I work with people like that too, who are interested in entrepreneurship and want to build something for themselves. Personally, I believe that the future is going to be a lot better for all of us if we have a bunch of small businesses providing jobs, providing benefits into the community, providing economic growth versus two or three or four giant corporations doing everything. We see what happens when there's a concentration of wealth and power amongst corporations, and it's not pretty. So I would much rather have distributed power, distributed economic power, growth, and wealth amongst people. That's why I kind of started working for myself because I want business owners, people who want to start businesses, be successful.
Wow. I see, and again, so Paul's the perfect person to ask, guys, like if you want to start a business because he knows, he definitely knows, and that's sort of what I want to ask. You. Well, first of all, I like the like from the beginning part of your story. You said that you were sort of getting before you got into like sort of like the more business side of things, you were into sort of more like the government sort of things like can you explain again like how that transition was and like did it feel like a huge transition from you to go from government and things like that where things are very structured to sort of just the business sort of things where things can get a little crazy and not unplanned for.
Yeah, I was a kid, to be honest. When I was recruiting to work for the government, I was in my 20s. And the process was so long and so drawn out and so formulaic, and all of the people that I spoke to and kind of that hiring process, it really taught me that wasn't for me. Highly structured environments with a lot of rules and a lot of routines and a lot of constraints, I don't do well in them. And I really don't do well in environments where there's a lot of top down control and micromanagement. So for the same reason, I would not be a good person to go work for a bank or an airline or an insurance agency and kind of sit in an office tower. Like, that is not for me. That's not my life. They would hate me. I would hate.
I love that, and I get that too. Is that what do you think what do you think is like the not necessarily qualities or like gatekeeping or anything like that, but like what do you think is like sort of like the qualities of, people that wanna start businesses and end up becoming, like, good business owners? Like, what do you think, like, are the qualities for that? Because, like you said, some people just don't do well or, like, just don't like, controlled environments and things like that. I'm definitely one of those people as well, and so, like, what do you think are, like, sort of like the qualities that make, like, a good, like, business owner, entrepreneur, and also the qualities that help them be successful and not, have to give up and then have to go back to a 9 to 5.
I love that you asked that question, because the truth is, pretty much anyone can be a successful business owner. Now we have this stereotype, we have this idea of entrepreneurs in our minds as go-getters, mavericks. They don't follow the rules. They do their own thing. They're hard-headed. They're brazen. They take chances. They're not averse to risk, and those things can help, but it's not the whole story. You can have entrepreneurs, business owners who are very thoughtful, who are very kind of considerate of information and are a little bit slower in making decisions and take their time and really think about things. Those people can absolutely be successful entrepreneurs and business owners. The key is to know who you are, be very self aware, and balance out your skill sets, what you bring to the table, with what other people can bring to the table. So you want to look for complementary relationships when you're starting a business and you're kind of founding that core team that's going to start the business early on with you. You want to have balance and harmony, and together you do great things. There's a saying that says something to the effect of, "If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together." And when you're starting a company and you want to go far, who you go with is very important. So you need to put some thought into that. So anybody can really be a successful entrepreneur, but you need to be self-aware. And you also need to be adaptable to change. You need to be willing to take on feedback, to listen both to your customers and to the people that you're working with, and make changes based on what's going on there. So I find that people who are really successful as entrepreneurs are people who kind of have those skills. They've got those soft skills and they can think critically about their environment and about what's going on in their business.
I love that. I love that. So it's really just about your ability to sort of adapt. Is that sort of, because,
Yeah.
business takes like a lot of adapting, lots of constant,
Yeah.
yeah, like
Yeah.
knowing what's working and what's not, you know?
Yep. Yep. And you also have to find your own kind of particular comfort level with saying, all right, I'm going to try this, and I will know it's not working when X happens or when Y happens, or I'm willing to give this a year or 18 months or 2 years. Everybody's number, everybody's condition is just a little bit different. But knowing what it is before you dive in can be extremely powerful. It can be very, very helpful for you on your journey.
I love that. And when do you like sometimes, businesses might have to make, like drastic changes or,
Mm.
things like that, or like evolve, more so, evolve, and, take different forms, as they grow. In my case, I'll just give you a little spurt about me, but, I, you know, I first started, writing online and I was sort of making money directly from this like writing platform called Medium, a
Mm.
social
Hmm.
blogging platform where, you post articles and you make money that way. And that was sort of, that was sort of, in the last sort of wave of, you can make money just by posting content, online and things like that directly. And you can just, monetize like that. But, like, over the years, I've learned, as a writer and, as someone that helps experts write online that, that model's sort of, obsolete now where, it's just, too much competition, way too hard to do that, especially for starting out. And so over the years, I've sort of had to always, evolve my business model, to include, another form of income where I'm not necessarily relying on views or, people that read my writing as like my sole source of income. And so I've had to, sort of adapt and get into more, service-based work where, it turned out, that, I'm charging, like a fixed amount and I'm helping experts, either build a personal brand online or monetize their skills online through, Substack, as, a sort of medium like that. And that's sort of how like my business has had to like evolve over the years. And part of me feels like maybe I should have, noticed the trend sooner because part of me wanted to stay on Medium and keep, my same old business model because I felt like, oh well, maybe this is just a lull. Maybe it's just, businesses have ebbs and flows. Maybe this is just, one of the, troughs, that I'm facing. And maybe I should just wait a little longer and see if things will get better. How do you sort of differentiate if it's just, sort of, it's just, like a slow phase that you're going through in your business, or it's like, no, you actually do have to make, a more drastic change than you think?
Hmm. That's a huge question. And I find that people who, and these are usually people, media personalities, they're kind of trying to sell something, they're hyping something, they're talking to the press about it, and they will say, I predicted that. I saw that coming. And isn't it great? Uh, the thing is that 90% of the time, you cannot see changes that affect your business drastically coming. They happen and you have to adapt to them. So I don't know if there's a formula to be able to sit down and say, okay, this is coming. It's going to fundamentally change my business. So I need to absolutely scrap everything that I'm doing and do something else like right now. You will get that wrong at least 50% of the time. And then you will look back on it later and say, oh, well, I changed everything, and this was just like a low point. And thank you for Margaret Williams, who kind of informed me or showed me that on this show I'm allowed to say bad words. So shit, 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 because that's just.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's very tough to kind of make that call. And anyone who says that they have a system or a formula for doing it is like they're full of shit. And they're trying to sell you something. So I find that it's a more productive attitude and it's a little bit better for building resilience for your business. If you think about what might happen should what you're doing change or go away, and how can you start to plan ahead of time in case, the worst happens. So for anybody who's heard of this concept of the portfolio career, where you might have like a main gig and then you've got a side hustle and maybe you do like something else that earns passive income. You've got four or five or six or more different things kind of fitting into your basket to earn a living. That's an example of that. That's basically taking an approach to earning money, your career and kind of your livelihood, and saying, what if one thing goes away and doesn't work? What do I do then? If you have those other things ready, you can adapt better and more quickly and be more resilient over time. If you don't have those other things ready and all your eggs are in one basket, so to speak, then that's when it gets super, super scary when things change. And for you, for writing, talking about Medium, that was really the last time that you could make money just by posting content. Yeah, absolutely. AI has kind of taken that and blown that way of earning money out of the water because like the nominal cost to create written content has dropped to near zero. So how can you charge a living wage to do the same thing that AI will do for practically free? The economics don't work, and people will say, "Yeah, I saw that coming," but they're kind of full of shit. It's just as likely that that wouldn't have happened if the technology had blown up like it had in 2022, but then there'd been a massive backlash of people even bigger than there was, people saying, no, this is wrong. We need to ban this. And had a government had kind of the courage to say, okay, we need to put curbs in place to protect people's livelihoods, then it would have been different. Even if the technology hadn't developed, people would still be able to monetize their skills creating written work, right? So anyone who says, I saw that coming, mm-mm, no, you didn't. But prepare for the worst is how I think that folks need to be able to kind of think about this when they're thinking about their own business, their own livelihoods.
Wow. Wow. Thanks so much for like saying that because I've always wondered like how do people know when like it's coming and when it's not coming and things like that, but it's like they actually don't really know. Like it's sort of impossible to like know exactly like what's gonna come and what's not. It's really just sort of it's more like luck.
There are people who are lucky and there are people who are unlucky, and that's what it boils down to. Now you can shift the odds in your favor a little bit, and I was talking about being resilient by being prepared for the worst case scenario. Like that's one of the things you can do to shift the odds in your favor a little bit. But it boils down to luck. No one person can know the totality of the future. No one person can control the totality of the future. We just need to be able to adapt, be prepared for it.
Gotcha. And that's another point I want to touch on. When it comes to sort of, the whole luck thing in business, do you, do you feel like some people are just do you ever feel like, you know, because I feel like I've been unlucky a lot in my business sometimes, but like I've had more luck definitely in like recent years, but like in the beginning, it felt really really unlucky, and it felt like like maybe I'm just gonna be unlucky, and maybe this just isn't gonna work. Um, like, do you feel like some people unfortunately are like always gonna be like unlucky, or do you think like when do you think? I know this is like a sort of like a you know, more of like a theoretical question, but like in terms of luck when it comes to business, do you feel like some people are like just unlucky and it's not their fault, it's just sort of how the cookie crumbles, or do you feel like maybe if they keep trying, sort of that thing where entrepreneurs sort of push, just keep going, just keep being consistent and you'll find luck someday. Do you believe that at all, or do you believe, if you're unlucky, then maybe you just should like just change, just drastically change something or things like that? What's sort of your perspective on like luck?
That's a huge question, and I love it. I absolutely love it. So let's unpack that kind of piece by piece. Do I believe that there are businesses or people who are just lucky or unlucky? Maybe a little bit, but I think that what we label as luck is actually structural advantage. So if we think about entrepreneurs who are successful, and I'm thinking more about entrepreneurs who are like raising money and doing the startup thing and are talked about in the press and selling their businesses and all that. If we think about that type of entrepreneur, they have a series of structural advantages behind them that are invisible to most of us because they're not really talked about because they don't fit that narrative or that story of I'm going to start a business and my goodness, because of my maverick nature, it's going to succeed. Like that's the story that kind of sells, right? But behind that, the structural advantages are things like network. They know lots of people who invest or they know people who have been successful in this area and they kind of can tap them for wisdom, or they come from a rich family and have a ton of money behind them, or they have other advantages that are socioeconomic or ethnic. Like there's definitely a race-based element to it, right? Like I, as a person who is white and a man, I'm going to have structural advantages, kind of helping me along that other people might not. So we often think of those things as not really attached to luck, but they are. Luck really manifests as all those things. And the inverse is true as well. Being unlucky manifests as the opposite. So do I think there's unlucky or lucky? Not really. I think that there's structural advantages and structural disadvantages. And if you're going to break through them and be successful, you need to be aware of what they are. And you need to think about how to get around them or how to climb over them or how to break through them. And Margaret talked about this a little bit too in her session. And it's absolutely on point. Like you need to be able to adapt to those things that are in front of you. And the first step is being aware. So it's not about lucky or unlucky. It's about what's the shit that's in front of me and how do I deal with it?
I love that. I love that. Yeah, that really is what it all comes down to. Just because I've just heard that word just bounced around in business a lot. It's just like, well, I just got lucky or things are unlucky. But like you said, it's pretty much just like structural advantages and things like that and how well we adapt to, changes and things. So yeah, I love that answer. And
Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. You can absolutely get a bad break in
yeah.
business. Like there's this concept of like the macroeconomic environment, which just means like what's going on in the world that could impact my business. Trade war is an example of that. Like no one individual small business owner has any control over international relations, but they're absolutely affecting their business, right? Same thing with war. Same thing with drought. If you're in the business of farming and you have a really bad crop because there was a drought, that's an externality. It's not something that you could have control for. So it's a bad break. But again, you can start to look at patterns behind bad breaks and you can start to think, okay, these bad breaks are happening, to other people. They might happen to me. How do I adapt to them? How do I address them? So like your bad breaks can become learning opportunities as well as you kind of progress, start a business, grow a business, even if you're in a mature environment. It's the same sort of thing. Like what you see and how you adapt to it are what matters.
I love that. Eloquently said. Love that. Thanks so much for that. And you mentioned network like a little bit ago, and that's also something I wanted to touch on and ask you about. We had a lady named Bethany on, for like I believe like the third day, so like right after Margaret, who's in this live stream. Thank you, Margaret, for coming to this live stream.
Oh,
um,
hey Margaret. I loved your session. Absolutely loved it.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes. Awesome. Shout out to Margaret. But awesome, awesome. Glad that you're on and you can see her. So I talked about like networking a little bit with this woman named Bethany Tapp, who's like a fitness coach, that, she was like
Yep.
positioned after her. And, she talked about, networking and how crucial it was for, her business and things like that and joining mastermind groups and, she's definitely, a huge go getter, which I really love, about her personality and things like that. And so I also want to get your perspective, sort of, on networking and things like that, because I feel like, do you feel like people are just at like a huge, disadvantage, if, they don't start, making those connections and creating those connections early on? And, do you feel like, how much do you feel like that could hinder, starting a business?
Yeah. Starting a business, not so much. It depends on the kind of business that you're starting. Like there are a lot of kind of factors that go into that. But the one thing I will say generally about networking is if you don't network, you are creating a structural disadvantage for yourself compared to people who do network. And networking can be really, really hard. Like for people who are introverts, and I am an introvert. Like I would love nothing rather than in my free time to just like chill out with those flamingo slippers and like a cat, my wife, and just like hang out and be cozy. Like that is what I would love. I have to force myself to be extroverted in certain situations for a certain amount of time so that I can go be amongst like the humans. Which is, it's antithetical to my very nature. I don't like it, but it's super important. Like making connections with people, and real connections, making real connections with people, not just I collected a business card from this person over there. So like I can call on them when, it kind of makes sense. Like those kind of connections, they don't really do a whole lot for you. But making meaningful connections with other people who are walking the same kind of path as you and who you might be able to help and who in return might help you, that's a huge advantage. And if you're looking, another kind of thing to think about this is for like people who are looking for jobs, or they're looking to do like seminars or something, where or education where it's like, okay, well, AI just took over absolutely everything, so there's no point in doing this. The one thing that AI cannot replicate, and I'm extremely sure that it will never be able to replicate in our lifetime, is in-person presence and connection. So being able to, like, if you're looking for a job, instead of like going out and doing the LinkedIn thing and just messaging a billion people, going out and meeting people in person at like mastermind groups or networking groups for job seekers or industry specific groups, like super, super valuable. That gives you a structural advantage over people who don't do that for sure. Because when you go to apply for a job or you pitch your business to someone else and they've met you and they kind of know you and have an impression about you, that sets you apart from the people who are just like names on the screen, right? I'm a big fan of doing what others aren't in life, whether it's business or personal, because it gives you an edge when you're trying to stand out and when you're trying to be memorable and trying to be noticed.
I love that. And what would you say is like the key to sort of making those like genuine, like long lasting connections? Because I remember like back in college, like I would go to networking events. I would go to networking events like sometimes. And like you said, like I'm an introvert as well. So, those were always like super hard for me to go to, and especially in person and just put myself out there. And I would try to make certain connections, but like this was before I even really thought about starting a business. It was more so just for, okay, like if I get out of college and I want a job somewhere or something like that, let's just go to a networking event and see what's out there. And so and so I guess part of it was, I didn't really like know like what I was doing, so like any connection I made probably wouldn't have been like a good one, just because I just didn't know like what my path would be. And so but like, what would you say is the key though? Because I've had, a few connections that I've made like initially, but they just sort of flew by the wayside as time progressed. How do you like sort of, get those genuine connections and sort of nurture them, even more so they stay, strong?
Yeah. And for folks who are listening and think, oh, geez, that's me. What am I doing wrong? 95% of people are the same. They'll try networking and connections won't really stick. They'll feel a little bit ostracized or a little bit like they stick out, like they don't belong there. That's all super, super common. Like everybody who goes to events to network, like they are going to feel that. And I find that the way to get over that is to really focus on what the people are there to do, like what they're doing. You can build relationships based on, vibes. Do you like the person? Do you have a lot to talk about, et cetera, et cetera? That's more of a social thing. And you can absolutely do networking like that. You can build those relationships based on like, oh, I love being around that person. They're fun. They're good to talk to. That's how salespeople do it, right? Uh, but another way to build connection with other people is common purpose. So if you invest the time in asking questions, and this also makes it easier for people who are introverts, ask questions about the other people, like, what are you involved in? What are you doing? And then they'll tell you, and, you can kind of mirror it back to them and say, oh, so you're doing, what do you think about this other thing? And if you do that long enough, and then you can start to kind of identify areas where what you're trying to do line up with what they're trying to do. And if you start talking about that, where there's common interest, that's where you really start to develop meaningful connections. And then over time, check in with people, continue to nurture that relationship. Say, oh, yeah, we met at this event and you said that you were building an app for people who wanted like cat sitters. How's that going? Like, I was also out. I noticed this other thing. I saw an app for people who are making like special cat food, raw diet cat food. And I found this really interesting. Maybe you could like use that with your app. You do things like that to nurture those connections over time, and people associate them with more value for their life. So you're creating that shared sense of purpose as you go on. And over time, that snowballs, right? The more that you can kind of invest in that, the bigger that shared sense of purpose gets, and the more that people will kind of respond to you and, pick up the phone if you call, or get back to you when you like message or email or whatever else, because they know who you are. They recognize that you've got that shared sense of purpose and they genuinely care. I find that that's a pretty effective way to do it.
I love that. Yeah, it's really like about like alignment, which is, sort of like you're sort of talking.
Yeah, I was trying to not use the word alignment because it would in my brain it's like, oh, anybody who says alignment is a corporate fool. So avoid it.
No, alignment, like, that's pretty much everything, that, like, that's pretty much the key, like, that is what it is, alignment
Yeah.
is important, so I love that, and like, I also want to touch on, like, how do you feel like on social media just because so many people are on it, like, I've also gone through this before where I've tried to sort of make genuine connections on other platforms. Substack is completely different, but I've been on Instagram, I've been on X, I've been on LinkedIn, and none of it really feels like Substack. Do you feel like making genuine connections, making those sorts of connections that you talked about on social media? Do you feel like that's harder to do just because me and Bethany were talking about during our session, like it's like she made a great point about how, a lot of it's like off platform. Like it's not really like just like on, social media just because things can sort of you never know what can happen, especially when you're on like an online platform, It's just sort of, you can meet, like on Zoom, you can meet on Zoom, you can do other things like that in video. But it's just sort of if it just stays on like a platform forever, it could be hard to sort of, nurture that relationship. Do you feel like do you feel like, social media, do you feel like it's harder to sort of nurture those connections, like, on social media, especially if you haven't really had any previous connection, off platform or anything like that?
Yes, absolutely. Social media is, I have some feelings about social media. Uh, they're not all good. Social media, the underlying businesses that operate social media networks, they have different incentives than people do, right? Like Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Meta, they are kind of in the position where they're monetizing attention. So they want us to be kind of locked into their feeds, and that's how they make money because they sell advertising space based on the time that we are kind of engaged in those apps. Those, though, that what you need to do that is different from what you need to do to foster real, meaningful, lasting connection. So that's kind of one thing about social media that works against us when we're trying to build relationships using it. Another thing is that the established social media platforms that have been around for a long time, like, we think about social media as this new technology that's like cutting edge and whatever. Facebook's been around for 22 years now, right? Instagram's been around for a long time. WhatsApp, it's a messaging app, but it's been around for a long time too. That means that there are billions of active users on it. So if you're, and I think about this as trying to, make waves by tossing a pebble in the ocean. If you're throwing a pebble in the ocean, you might see the ripple a little bit for about 2.5 seconds, and that's that. That's what it's like trying to build a brand on social media, the established social media platforms now. The content is going to be very short lived. You're also going to kind of tailor what you're doing to respond to feedback that you get from the platform about what's working and what's not working. So that means that by the very nature of it, if you're trying to get more views, impressions, what have you, you're really chasing trends instead of building and developing authentic connections with people, right? So those two things, they're also different. And another thing that I find stacks against us when we're trying to build relationships using social media is that it's a lot of it is like text based, right? So you're typing out comments, you're typing out like whatever, reactions to a people's post. And the natural human body language that's a part of communication is missing. Like you don't see facial expressions, you don't see body language when you're commenting on something. And it's extremely easy to misconstrue what you're saying, the other person to like take it the wrong way um, because of that kind of thing, right? Like, human communication really involves like our whole body, like our tone of voice, everything. So all of those things just being missing from social media, like we're doing videos, so that's a little bit better, but you can't see my full body language, right? So it's still like there's something missing. All of those things that are a part of communication are just missing from social media. Is social media useful when you're building a business? Yeah, yeah, it absolutely is. But is it going to be like rolling a big ball uphill if you're using it to build community? Yeah, yeah, it absolutely is. Like you need to think about different ways to build connection and community that aren't just like relying on social media. Like it's you've got to do it if you're going to be successful.
Wow. That's an amazing point, and I love what you said when you talked about, like, the body language and things like that, like, that is, like it's sort of like an underlying thing that, is often forgotten when it comes to, building connections and like
It's
that.
second nature, right? Like
Mm.
the way that we communicate, the way that we talk, the way we hold ourselves, it's all second nature to us, so we don't think about it. But when it's missing, we notice it. We might not notice that that's what's missing, but we notice it.
Exactly. Wow. Especially, I would imagine, like, COVID kinda made this, harder and sort of, worse, so
I've got a lot of I got a lot of feels for people who were in their like late teens, early 20s during lockdowns and going to school. Like all of that kind of socializing gone. Like that's a really pivotal time in your life. You know, you're forming connections, relationships. You're really learning a lot about yourself. And for folks who kind of like go away to school, they're learning how to be on their own, and that's super important. And for a generation, you know, for 3 years there, that was ripped away from them. And adapting to that is going to be tough because now they're like in the workforce or trying to be in the workforce. Maybe they're still at home with their parents. You know, maybe they're in situations that or living arrangements that haven't really allowed them to grow and to experience life on their own. And like they're going to have to figure that out. It's going to be really tough for them through no fault of their own.
yeah. Yeah, like, that's yeah, because 'cause I've had some siblings that, pretty much, graduated and stuff, and there's some that couldn't even have graduations because, couldn't because, lockdown.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that definitely sucks. I mean, they were happy to get their diplomas and stuff, but, and their degrees, but, like, sucks that, they weren't there to actually, have that, experience. So,
To celebrate
yeah.
and to have the recognition. Yeah, I feel like in general we don't celebrate and recognize achievements as much as we should. And I think that it gets worse as we get older and as we grow and we progress in our careers. We start to forget that taking a moment to recognize what we've been through, the things that we've achieved, and really reflect on them and say, "Oh man, wow, I did that." Like what would 20 years ago me have said about that? Like they would have been absolutely astounded. You know, we kind of lose that. But if you get into that habit of like taking a pause, reflecting, and recognizing, it helps a lot with your confidence. And confidence is something that entrepreneurs struggle with. Confidence and loneliness. Being an entrepreneur is it's extremely lonely. Like if you've ever started a business and you, I'm sure have kind of felt this, you know, you work for yourself, you're building something for yourself. All of your friends, all of your family who have like 9 to 5s, they work for other people. They ask, oh, you know, what do you do for a living? Or how's this thing going? And you don't even know how to explain it to them because like their world is so foreign to your world. And it's like, how do you bring those things together? And that's true of all entrepreneurs. All entrepreneurs, like they suffer from loneliness at varying points to varying degrees because of that. And that's why you have like those kind of mastermind groups and you have coaching groups. And you know, they're really successful and popular because a part of it is entrepreneurs need social connection as much as everybody else to really thrive and to feel comfortable and confident. So they seek that out when they can't get it through friends and family in these third party networks with common interests.
I love it. Yeah, it's definitely a lonely experience, especially when, again, like it also means, that your schedule's kind of, not like the same as like everyone
Oh, yeah.
else's. Like sometimes like you're going to be working and they're just going to, ask you like, why can't, you want to go out or, things like that. It's just like, sorry, I can't. Like I got to work. So,
For
you
sure.
know.
Friends of mine, maybe a month ago or something. You know, I got a message from one of them. They said, "Hey, we're going to go to this pub," which we do. fairly frequently just kind of go and hang out and chat and have a pint or two and just like unwind. It's super common, super normal. And I had to say to them like, oh, I can't do that. I'm talking to a client in Tokyo at like 9 o'clock. And they're like, oh, well, why? And then they're like, oh, yeah, time zones. And I was like, yeah. And they're like, yeah, I don't have to do that at work. And I was like, no, you don't. I do, though.
Yeah, yeah. So it's definitely, a different world. So definitely, like, again, there's definitely perks that come with entrepreneurship, but there's definitely, some things where it's just like, sometimes, you wish you had time for other things. But again, like, but at the end of the day, everything balances out. And, sometimes it's, it feels worth it, especially if you love the work that you're doing. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and
yes.
for folks who are thinking about starting a business, like be very, very critical of, and there are tons of like coaches, mentors, educators, speakers selling courses and stuff out there. There are tons of them. Be very critical of people who say this is the best thing you will ever do with your life. You're going to love every second. You're going to get freedom. You're going to get more money. And they talk about all of the good things without being realistic. Entrepreneurship is not like that. I personally believe that on balance, it is still very, very positive, but you have to be able to accept that there are going to be bad times. And just like anything else, you have to be able to adapt to that. When you're an entrepreneur, like your 9 to 5 doesn't really exist. Steady paycheck for a lot of entrepreneurs doesn't really exist. Like one of the benefits of being an entrepreneur, especially a solo entrepreneur, is that your earning potential is unlimited in theory, right? Like that's talked about a lot and it's kind of true, but you also need to recognize that the opposite is true. Your floor is unlimited. Like if you're not borrowing money to fund your business, then your floor is like you didn't make any money this month and that sucks. Uh, you need to know that that can be a thing. You need to be okay with it and you need to plan for it. Like have a backup plan. And I find a lot of people when they're first getting into entrepreneurship and they're kind of starting a business, especially if it's like a knowledge-based or a skills-based business where they're providing services, um, instead of thinking, how long will it take to replace my income? Can I do it within like a month? Think more in gradual terms and think, okay, can I go from my full-time job that pays the bills and whatever and start building a little bit, get my feet wet, get the ball rolling, then find another job that's part-time job that still gives me regular income, can help me pay some of the bills as my business scales up. And then eventually when you have a repeating book of business and you have recurring revenue and you get to the point where you've got, a year behind you, you said, okay, for the past year, I've reliably brought in X amount of money, then say, okay, maybe I can get rid of this part-time business. Like you don't have to jump into the pool head first to start a business. You can do it gradually. It's totally okay. Anybody who tells you it's not okay, tell them to go fuck themselves.
Well, with that being said, I think we're gonna end. That's a great note to end on, for real. I think we're gonna end. We're gonna end on that. End on that. Well, this was such an eye-opening conversation, Paul. Like another great one. I just love talking with you about these things. You have so much like great knowledge that you shared with us. And thank you so so much for coming on today and just educating us, on business and things like that. You just have so much, great experience. And, I love the topics we touched on. Very eye opening. And yeah, like come on anytime. Like, like, again, don't be a stranger. I've said this with everybody that's been on, but like, again, like, if you have any like new findings, any topics, anything that you want to bring to us, anything that you learned or something that you really feel like you want to talk about, don't be afraid to come back on and give us the tea. Don't be afraid to come back on. Don't be a stranger. I love talking with you. This was an amazing conversation. And again, thank you to everyone that joined us tonight. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Paul, let them know where they can find you.
Yeah, so I write a Substack called The Journey. It's usually a little bit more like clean mouthed. I don't go off on like ripping tangents like I did in this. Thanks for kind of indulging me. It's sixcatalysts.substack.com, and my website is sixcatalysts.com. You can find me there. Lots of free stuff. Really, with my Substack, I just try to be educational. I try and give people tips, tricks, confidence, and teach. It's all about that. I'm not really into like, hey, buy my course or hey, hire me as a coach. It's just there for you to like read and learn and hopefully gain enough so that you can start a business. You can take that leap. That's what I want.
I love that. Well, everyone go over to Six Catalysts and subscribe. I'm subscribed. I love the content that Paul is putting out over there. And again, if you want to start a business, Paul's the one to go to. So again, thank you all so much for coming on. Again, Expert Conversations has been a one heck of a conversation. Another one, another great one. So thank you all for supporting this, live stream series, Story Miss. Again, this recording will be up, pretty much as soon as it's done. I'm going to be posting clips as well. And again, we got another one tomorrow, again, December 1st through December 12th, live streams every day. And again, thank you all, especially if you went on the previous live stream. Thank you so much for your support. And if you just tuned in with us, thanks so much for coming, and rocking with us tonight. So, don't want to take too much of Paul's time. Again, Paul, come on anytime you want. Just tell us, and we can get that set up. Loved having you on. And with that being said, good night, Paul, and good night, everybody. Thank you so much.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays, Paul. Happy holidays, everyone. Bye.